8. A gangster's mistake. In October 2021, a gangster accidentally shot and killed his friend in a car as they were getting ready to go on a ride-out to attack some rivals in West London. 39-year-old Chirag Amir Chirag unintentionally killed his friend and fellow gang member, 28-year-old Mohammed Muhyiddin, by accidentally shooting him in the back with a submachine gun. On Halloween night, they were sitting in a Toyota Prius outside a house in Harlington High Street when everything suddenly went wrong. Instead of going after their targets, Chirag accidentally went after his partner. Chirag's Agram 2002 submachine gun was equipped with a silencer, so it's unlikely that anyone heard the shot. This made it a lot easier to get rid of the body without drawing suspicion. After realizing what he'd done, Chirag drove to Heathrow Airport and dumped Mohammed in a ditch. Later, his remains were found by a taxi driver. There's apparently a house on Harlington High Street that's used for drug deals. Chirag and a man named Mohammed Shakil, a different Mohammed, got into an argument with a group of men at the property the night before the shooting. During the altercation, Shakil showed off an imitation gun to intimidate the men, while Chirag brandished the real deal. When Mohammed was killed, Chirag wasn't the only one in the car. Shakil and an unnamed 17-year-old were also there. After the shooting, the remaining men panicked and came up with a plan. First, they dumped the body in a ditch. Then, the 17-year-old drove the Prius to Trout Lane and set it on fire. The men didn't get away with the crime, though, and were arrested in early November. Their 17-year-old accomplice was apprehended 4 days later. Chirag was convicted of manslaughter and possession of a firearm with intent to endanger life. Shakil pleaded guilty to possession of an imitation firearm with intent to cause fear of violence. They were both also found guilty of perverting the course of justice. All 3 men involved in 28-year-old Mohammed Muhyiddin's death will be sentenced in February 2023. 7. Selfie with stolen goods. In July 2014, a woman stole jewelry and a dress from a boutique in southern Illinois. She got caught for the crime after posting about it on Facebook. Some people think a selfie is worth 1,000 words, but the photo posted by 27-year-old Danielle Saxton spoke only one: guilty. The woman stole from Morty's boutique in West Frankfort and was sure she'd gotten away with it. That is, until her social media snitched on her. Apparently, Saxton took several images of herself wearing the stolen merchandise and then posted them to her Facebook. Included among the items was a dress, a few shirts, jewelry, and more. According to the store's co-owner, Kurt Williams, the dress Saxton stole had a distinct leopard print. When Saxton posted a selfie in the dress, she was basically turning herself in. Williams told local news station WSIL-TV that she saw Saxton leave the shop with the stolen items as she was coming to work that day. When she questioned the thief, her excuse was that there wasn't anybody working inside and that she was able to simply walk out of the store with the clothes without being stopped. After checking the security footage, Williams posted about the event online, and luckily, Saxton's pictures led officers straight to her. When the police arrested the woman, she apparently still had the stolen clothes in her hand. They also found out that she was wanted in a different country on a separate warrant. Since the incident happened, Saxton has been released from jail, but hopefully her phone is still locked up, since she really shouldn't be allowed to use it. 6. Fugitive applies for cop job. A fugitive thought it would be a good idea to apply for a job at a New Jersey sheriff's office back in October 2022. Former Postal Service worker, 27-year-old Zima Johnson from Jersey City, was on the run for a crime she carried out in Monroe County, Pennsylvania, when she decided to apply to the Hudson County Sheriff's Office. She sent in paperwork and her resume to be a security guard, and she was likely pretty excited when they called her back about the job. She was asked to come down to the station for an interview, but it was all a ruse set up by the sheriff's office. According to Sheriff Frank Sholari, when Zima showed up, she was immediately arrested. Apparently, the woman had a long list of charges that she'd failed to show up in court for, including fraud and traffic-related incidents. Officers discovered 2 stolen credit cards on the woman when she was busted, and she was hit with an additional charge for theft. Sheriff Sholari told the Jersey Journal that after Zima was taken into custody, the United States Postal Investigative Service decided to launch its own investigation into her behavior, since she once worked for the Postal Service. The Hudson County Sheriff's Office apparently sent in a tip to USPS after they arrested Zima. The criminal is currently being held in the Hudson County Jail, but she'll eventually be moved to Pennsylvania to face her charges. It's considered a misdemeanor in most states if you fail to show up for a scheduled court date, so it's unclear why Zima thought she'd get away with it for so long. It's also not known why she would apply for a job with law enforcement, considering she was a fugitive on the run. 5. Failed escape. In July 2018, a pair of criminals tried escaping the Canadian police after using a stolen credit card to buy soda from a gas station in Edmonton, Alberta. The not-so-savvy thieves were caught at the Spruce Grove Ready Mart. During their escape, 28-year-old Richard Parizo was tased by an officer, and 29-year-old Brittany Burke somehow fell through the ceiling off the convenience store after trying to leave the building. When police first got to the Ready Mart, Parizo pushed Burke toward an officer, forcing both the cop and the woman to the ground. Burke held onto the officer in a bear hug while her boyfriend managed to run away. But he found himself in the store's stockroom with the back door locked. So he decided to go back out the front of the store where the officer was waiting. Eventually, Parizo was forced to give up. While the cop turned his sights back on Parizo, Burke tried to escape as well. She too found herself in the stockroom with no way out. But she saw a ladder propped up against a wall and decided to try and climb out through the ceiling. All was going well at first, but then she ran into a few loose ceiling tiles and fell down onto the metal shelves below. This is when 2 more officers got to the establishment, and both criminals were arrested. Richard Parizo was charged with assaulting a police officer, resisting arrest, possession of stolen property, and using a stolen credit card. Brittany Burke was charged with failing to comply, mischief, and obstructing a police officer. For her involvement, Burke was ordered to serve 15 days in jail. Parizo was sentenced later, but unfortunately, his punishment term is unclear. 4. Hazard lights. In summer 2021, 2 brothers were caught red-handed dumping their murder victim in Pennsylvania woods after they forgot to turn off their car's hazard lights. The New Jersey teenagers were charged with criminal homicide after police found them dumping the body. 19-year-old Anthony Gamble and his younger brother, 17-year-old Joshua Gamble, were taken into custody after Pennsylvania state troopers checked on what they thought were disabled vehicles. Troopers approached a parked Audi and blinking silver Subaru after midnight, and they found Joshua in the woods. According to a statement from prosecutors, he was wearing a glove on one of his hands, and his shoes were bloody. As the authorities detained Anthony, whose clothes were also blood-stained, he tried to escape and ran towards his car, but he was stopped and promptly arrested. The brothers' victim was then found in the woods next to the Audi, and inside the car, authorities found a lot of blood and a large knife near the passenger side. Bucks County District Attorney Matt Weintraub told the New York Post that the unidentified male victim was stabbed in his neck, arm, upper chest, and head. The murder weapon, both of the brothers' cars, and the victim's body were all within 100 feet or 30 meters of each other. The teens were charged with criminal conspiracy, homicide, tampering with evidence, and possession of an instrument of crime. It was discovered that shortly before the victim, 26-year-old Kevin Rosero, was found, the brothers transferred $400 from his phone to Joshua's phone, so they were handed extra charges of computer trespass robbery, and unlawful use of a computer. Unfortunately, there hasn't been any recent updates on the case, and the Gamble brothers' sentencing is unclear. 3. Cheeto dust. A woman who broke into an Oklahoma home in February 2021 was captured by police thanks to the Cheeto dust they found on her teeth. Sharon Carr was caught orange-handed. She was arrested and charged with first-degree burglary after trying to rob a homeowner in Tulsa. Apparently, the police arrived at the property that night after they got a call from a scared mother of two. She said that another woman had ripped the screen off her window and climbed inside. When the homeowner noticed the thief, the snack-loving criminal quickly fled the scene, leaving through the same window she entered. When the authorities investigated, they found a bottle of water and a Cheetos bag on the ground near the window. They started looking around the area for the fugitive, but after just a few minutes into the search, Sharon Carr came out of the shadows. The mother of two identified Carr as the robber, and the arrest was cemented when officers discovered orange snack food residue still stuck to the woman's teeth. 2. Criminal couldn't hold it. In February 2020, a man from Michigan had a humiliating run-in with the law after he allegedly relieved himself on the bumper of a Florida police car. The defendant, 26-year-old David Marcel Lewis Johnson, was captured by authorities midstream. He'd apparently been in downtown St. Petersburg that night after 1 a.m. when he was seen approaching the squad car. He then began urinating on the bumper of the vehicle. According to the arrest affidavit, Johnson was taken into custody while still in the commission of the crime, hence midstream. He was busted for the act on a block where several nightclubs and popular bars are located, but it's unclear if Johnson was under the influence of alcohol or not. Apparently, Johnson didn't want to cooperate with questioning, and he made things extremely difficult for authorities. In the end, he was charged with disorderly conduct, specifically for urinating in a place where members of the public could have easily seen him. Johnson was initially sent to jail, but he was freed from custody after one of his relatives posted his $250 bond. Johnson, who lives near Detroit, Michigan, has refused to plead guilty to the strange misdemeanor count. 1. Wrong house. In August 2022, a man broke into a Chippewa Falls, Minnesota house and locked himself in one of the residents' bathrooms so he could take a bath. The criminal, 29-year-old Kyle S. Kozel, was charged with criminal trespass and burglary. The incident happened at around 6 in the morning on August 10th. A 911 call was placed by the owner of the house, and they reported that a complete stranger had broken in and taken over their bathroom. When officers arrived, they ordered Kozel to leave. He complied with their request, but he exited wearing only a t-shirt and underwear, which were apparently inside out. He had the tub faucet running and his pants were on the floor of the bathroom, indicating that he'd planned to take a relaxing bath. Kozel told officers that the house belonged to his girlfriend and that he was staying with her, but nobody living in the home knew who Kozel was or how he even got inside the residence in the first place. When officers questioned the intruder, he gave them an address in Rochester and claimed the home he was in was his apartment, even though he was actually in Chippewa Falls. Not surprisingly, police noticed a strong smell of alcohol emanating from him, suggesting that he wasn't in the right state of mind. It doesn't seem like Kozel was charged with breaking and entering, but as terms of his release, he's not allowed to have any contact with the victims or their home, and he's been barred from possessing or consuming alcohol. The disappearance of Hannah Graham. 18-year-old University of Virginia student Hannah Graham was last seen alive at a restaurant in Charlottesville during the early morning hours of September 13, 2014. Witnesses reported that she was with 32-year-old Jesse Leroy L.J. Matthew Jr., and that the two were seen cozying up to each other. They also said that Hannah appeared to be drunk. One bystander, who saw the couple near a car matching the description of Matthew's vehicle, said that the man she was with looked unfriendly. They claimed to overhear Hannah saying, "I'm not getting in that car with you." 5 weeks after her disappearance, Hannah's remains were found on an abandoned property about 12 miles or 19 kilometers from where she went missing. Her death was ruled a homicide by undetermined means. Home surveillance footage from numerous cameras helped police trace Hannah's last known whereabouts. And in one clip, she can be seen stumbling, adding to suspicions that she was intoxicated at the time. The footage also proves that she was with Matthew since he was identified in the video. While investigating Matthew, police connected him to the 2009 disappearance and murder of college student Morgan Harrington, as well as an assault that happened back in 2005. He was ultimately convicted of both murders and the assault, as well as various other charges surrounding the crimes. The surveillance footage from Hannah Graham's last night alive proved instrumental in winning her murder case. At the moment, Matthew is serving 4 life sentences behind bars for his horrific actions. 9. Francisco Leon Casavant. One night in 2021, a man was captured on surveillance footage staring into the window of a residence in Hollywood, Florida. He could be seen moving a paving stone into place and standing on it to get a better look inside. The homeowner, Janelle Drayton, was eating dinner with her child at the time. She was unaware of the peeping Tom's presence until she noticed the paving stone missing from its usual spot. She then watched her home camera footage to figure out where it went. By then, the man was long gone, but to the woman's horror, the video showed that he'd stood outside her home, looking inside for almost 2 hours. Police recognized the creep in the video as 24-year-old Francisco Leon Casavant, who was already facing a criminal charge for allegedly assaulting a woman in a previous incident from 2020. In that case, he was accused of forcing his way into a woman's home, taking her to the ground and choking her. But luckily, she fought back and managed to escape before he could fully follow through with his plans. At the time, Casavant was out on bond and awaiting trial for allegations of touching himself inappropriately in front of another woman. His past goes back even further than that, according to Broward County Assistant State Attorney Taylor Hoffman, who told the South Florida Sun-Sentinel that Casavant had faced at least 5 previous incident exposure charges. At the time of his arrest in early 2021, he'd recently pled out of all 3 of his cases. Even more shockingly, Casavant was on an electric monitoring device when he committed his most recent offense. He reportedly cut the monitor off before going out that night and spying on the unsuspecting resident and her family. Authorities charged him with committing an unnatural and lascivious act, resisting arrest, and violating probation. He was taken to the local jail as a result, and he was held without bond. Unfortunately, there hasn't been any recent updates on the case, and Casavant's sentencing is unclear. 8. The Queens Firebomber. In early 2012, a man filled empty Starbucks Frappuccino bottles with gasoline and fashioned Molotov cocktails out of them. He then threw them at various homes and businesses throughout Queens, New York. He targeted at least 2 homes, an Islamic center and a deli. One residence was damaged so badly it was rendered uninhabitable. Police began tracking the suspect after a gas station captured footage of him filling the Frappuccino bottles with gas while pretending to fill his vehicle's gas tank. He was driving a stolen car, and investigators managed to track down the vehicle to another location, where they waited for him to arrive. 40-year-old Ray Lazier Langand, an unemployed truck driver, was taken into custody on 5 counts of possession of an explosive, 4 counts of arson, and 1 count of a hate crime for making anti-Muslim statements at one of the crime scenes. He allegedly confessed to the firebombings during questioning, telling detectives that he targeted most of the victims because he had a grudge against them. Langand said he firebombed the Islamic Center because they refused to let him use the bathroom. In another incident, which was captured on surveillance video, he mistakenly targeted a home that houses a small Hindu temple during an attempt to victimize a drug dealer. Lengand already had an extensive rap sheet by then, which included past charges for weapons, crack possession, and check kiting. In addition to the firebombings, he was accused of stealing the car he was driving from JFK Airport. He faced both state and federal charges, and received sentences of 20 and 18 years, which he's now serving concurrently. 7. Rodri Green. In December 2022, police responded to a call about a stabbing in Georgetown, South Carolina. They found the victim at the scene with stab wounds to his thigh, head, and face. He had a jacket tied around his leg to slow the bleeding, but he was in rough shape. The injured man told the responding officers that he was riding in a car with the suspect, 44-year-old Rodri Green, when the man suddenly held him at gunpoint and said that he planned to rob him and his father. The victim escaped from the vehicle and ran toward a house in hopes of getting someone to call for help. However, Green followed and attacked him before fleeing the scene. But miraculously, the victim managed to knock on a resident's door. Surveillance footage from a nearby home corroborated the man's version of events and helped confirm the suspect's identity. Police were unable to locate Green that day, but they caught up with him 2 days after the stabbing when an employee at a local AT&T store hit the panic button while he was inside. Green allegedly entered the store and knocked merchandise off shelves while spitting on the items. He then screamed obscenities and threatened to kill everyone that was there. This violent outburst was also captured on camera. In the end, Green was charged with shoplifting, possession of marijuana, assault and battery, disorderly conduct, and resisting arrest. This case is so recent that Green hasn't received sentencing for his crimes yet. 6. Daniel Bryan Nave. Multiple residents along a particular street in Tempe, Arizona were horrified in late 2022 when they reviewed their home surveillance footage and discovered a peeping Tom peering in through their windows at night. The first known incident happened during the early hours one morning toward the end of summer, when a homeowner's Ring camera captured video of the man looking inside. At one point, he could be seen leaving the residence, but he returns again later. During his second visit, the creep went into the backyard and peered in through multiple windows. A few days later, the same man was seen looking into someone's home while they were using the bathroom. They called the police, who arrived in time to catch the suspect, 22-year-old Daniel Bryan Nave. Officers took him into custody on previous warrants, but he was soon released. Just a week later, Nave was caught at a third residence in the same neighborhood, where he allegedly watched someone taking a shower through their bathroom window. He was accused of returning to the home twice over the following days and peering in through the bedroom and kitchen windows. During his fourth visit, a home security camera captured the suspect lurking in the backyard. After noticing the camera, he left and didn't return. The alleged serial spy was charged with 7 counts of trespassing and 2 counts of surreptitious viewing. He was then taken to the Tempe City Jail, where he's currently waiting for his next court date. 5. A hailstorm of bullets. During the early morning hours of April 9, 2021, 2 armed men approached a house in Miramar, Florida, and fired dozens of bullets straight at the windows and doors. The 2 adults and 6 children inside the home dove for cover amid the onslaught of bullets, which struck one teenager in the arm. It wasn't long before he was laying on the kitchen floor in a pool of his own blood. Luckily, the young man survived the incident. The shooting was captured on home surveillance footage. The homeowner, Ebony Moore, told the South Florida Sun-Sentinel that her son and his friend had just arrived and were the only people in the house who were awake when the incident took place. Her son's friend was the shooting victim. Moore said that she was grateful that none of her 5 kids, who were all home at the time and ranged in age between 8 and 18 years old, were unharmed. She was especially relieved that none of the 40 bullets struck her daughter, who was sleeping in the living room right in the path of the shooters. Ebony and her husband said that they recognized the shooters as the same men who robbed their son at gunpoint a month earlier. They told the police the suspects' names, but unfortunately, the teen who was shot didn't want to press charges and was uncooperative with the investigation. It made the case difficult to pursue, and no arrests were made. The incident left the Moore children traumatized, to the point where the family could no longer celebrate the 4th of July. Now, the sound of fireworks only reminds them of the shooting. Ebony's husband, Hensel, said he wanted to pack up his family and leave Florida amid the ongoing violence that was plaguing the area at the time. Hopefully, the family has found a sense of safety since then. 4. Anthony Mergatroid. In an effort to find out why his girlfriend's dog was destroying her furniture, Anthony Mergatroid set up a motion-activated dog cam at the woman's home in Leeds, England. But the camera served a much different purpose in late 2022, when the couple got into an argument about Mergatroid seeing prostitutes. During the disagreement, the couple unknowingly activated the camera, and it captured footage of Mergatroid hitting his partner and dragging her out of the house. The video also showed him chasing and threatening the victim with a zombie knife while making slashing motions near her head. Both the victim and the couple's dog clearly seemed distressed in the footage of the disturbing assault. At some point, the woman escaped and ran to a neighbor who called for help. Meanwhile, police apprehended Mergatroid during a violent struggle at his residence. The victim was too terrified to testify in court, but the camera footage was enough to secure a conviction. Mergatroid pleaded guilty to assault and a weapons charge, and as a result, he was sentenced to 20 months behind bars. 3. Triple slaying. 36-year-old Paul Billion was found dead from a gunshot wound in the kitchen of his Sioux Falls, South Dakota home during the summer of 2022. By the time his remains were discovered, he'd been dead for several days. In a briefing, Police Lieutenant Nick Butler said that it appeared to be a drug-related robbery that escalated into violence. The investigation carried on for 4 months while detectives worked to identify the suspects and their social media activity. Various home cameras captured 3 suspects coming and going from Billion's residence, and other evidence convicted a 4th suspect to the murder weapon. Gabo Westford Uo, Thomas Tarley, and Sotimon Poli were charged with first-degree murder and burglary. Carnell Jimerson also faces a weapons charge in connection with the gun that was used to kill the victim. The murder suspects are being held on bails of over $1 million each, while their case makes its way through the legal system. 2. Mickey Vin Brown. Just days into the 2023 new year, Broward County Sheriff's deputies responded to a call about shots fired at a home in North Lauderdale, Florida. They arrived to find a man unresponsive in the driveway, suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. Unfortunately, he was pronounced dead at the scene. The victim's name is being withheld under Florida's Marsy's Law, which went into effect in 2018. The law allows crime victims to shield their identities and personal information from the public. Homicide detectives identified the suspect with help from witnesses, evidence, and surveillance footage. The alleged shooter, 20-year-old Mickey Vin Brown, was pulled over and apprehended in the nearby city of Tamarack. He was charged with second-degree murder with a firearm, committing a first-degree felony with a weapon, and probation violation. Brown is currently being held in the local jail pending the next step in his case. 1. Kyle Halls. Just days before Thanksgiving in 2022, a house in Philadelphia was firebombed in the middle of the night. The homeowner was upstairs when they heard glass shattering on the ground floor and rushed downstairs to find the curtains engulfed in flames. Luckily, all 4 residents escaped unharmed, and firefighters managed to get the blaze under control before it could spread throughout the house. In the aftermath of the unexpected fire, the homeowner obtained surveillance footage of the alleged perpetrator throwing a flaming object at the window. Other surveillance video from the days leading up to the fire showed the same man discarding a cardboard box along the street. Some mail that was found inside the box had the name Kyle Halls on it, and he was the same man that was identified by prosecutors in the footage. In addition to allegedly torching the townhouse, Halls was accused of breaking the window of another building nearby. The Temple University Police Department arrested him and turned the case over to the Philadelphia police. At the moment, the case is ongoing. 8. Albert Flick. After serving her husband Albert with divorce papers in 1979, Sandra Flick asked him to pick up his belongings from her home. When he arrived, he stabbed her at least 14 times and left her for dead. A neighbor found Sandra covered in blood and dying in her apartment. With her last breath, she said that Albert was responsible for the horrifying act. Flick received a 30-year prison sentence, but was released 9 years early due to good behavior. But his pattern of violence against women continued, and in 2007, he allegedly punched a woman and stabbed her with a fork. 3 years later, Flick was accused of putting another woman in a headlock, hitting her with the butt of his knife, and chasing her with a screwdriver. Prosecutors recommended an 8 to 9 year sentence, but the judge believed that the aging defendant was getting too old to commit any more violent acts and sentenced him to 4 years. Shortly after his release in 2014, Flick crossed paths with the woman he had assaulted in 2010 and threatened her, landing him back behind bars for another 2 years. After getting out of prison yet again in 2016, he moved to Lewiston, Maine, where he befriended 48-year-old Kimberly Dobby at a local library. Flick could tell that Dobby was struggling and offered to feed her 2 sons. But what started out as a seemingly generous helping hand soon turned into a terrifying stalking campaign. The elderly felon became obsessed with Dobby and began following her relentlessly around town. One day in 2018, a businessman heard a woman screaming from outside a local laundromat. He ran outside to find Flick viciously stabbing Dobby in broad daylight. He did it right in front of her kids. The man tried to intervene, but it was too late to save her life. In 2019, at the age of 77, Flick was convicted of Dobby's murder and sentenced to life. 7. Kenneth McDuff. Kenneth Allen McDuff's life of crime dates back to the 1960s, during his early adulthood. At 18 years old, he was convicted of multiple burglaries in Texas. He served a short prison sentence and was released in 1965. Less than a year later, McDuff and an accomplice, Roy Dale Green, kidnapped 3 teenagers. McDuff shot and killed 2 of the victims, Robert Brand and Mark Dunman, before he and Green repeatedly assaulted the 3rd victim, Edna Louise Sullivan. After the pair were finished with their cruel attacks, McDuff broke her neck with a broomstick and dumped her lifeless body in some bushes. He was originally sentenced to death, but his punishment was commuted to life in prison in 1972, when Texas ended its use of the death penalty for a short period. In 1989, McDuff managed to convince the parole board to release him, despite having recently received an additional 2-year sentence for trying to bribe one of the board members. He allegedly killed someone just 3 days after his release, but was never charged in the case. After briefly returning to prison for a parole violation and once again regaining his freedom in 1991, McDuff tortured and killed 6 prostitutes over a 5-month period. The murders were spread out over several counties, and by the time investigators connected McDuff to the crimes, he had moved to Missouri and was living under an alias. One of his coworkers recognized him from an episode of America's Most Wanted and contacted authorities, who confirmed through fingerprints that they had the right suspect. McDuff was convicted of capital murder and was sentenced to death for the 2nd time. He was executed in 1998. 6. Cody Backus. In 2007, at just 22 years old, Cody Backus was faced with the possible reality of spending the rest of his life behind bars. Just a year earlier, he was involved in an armed robbery in Syracuse, New York, that resulted in the shooting death of a man named James Brennan Jr. Backus claimed that he wasn't the gunman, but a mere participant in the home invasion gone wrong. He said that he didn't even know one of his accomplices was armed. He was nevertheless convicted of murder and was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. A state Supreme Court judge overturned the conviction in 2014, citing new evidence that corroborated Backus's claim that he was unaware that one of his co-defendants was carrying a gun. But the decision was reversed the following year, and he was sent back to prison. Backus was paroled in 2018. 4 years later, he became the prime suspect in the murder of his neighbor, 82-year-old Marshall Foster, who was found on the floor of his home in critical condition after being attacked by an intruder. Foster reportedly languished for 2 days with a severe brain injury and multiple facial and spinal fractures before he was discovered clinging to life. He was rushed to the hospital where he died from his injuries. Police connected Backus to the assault after he allegedly posted footage of it on social media and continuing to beat the senior citizen after forcing his way inside. Backus faces charges of second-degree murder, first-degree manslaughter, burglary, and assault, and is currently being held at the Oswego County Jail on a $500,000 bond. 5. David Moust. David Edward Moust was just 9 years old when his mother dumped him off at a mental institution in Pennsylvania. He already had a troubling history of violence by then, which included attacks on other children and killing small animals. Moust joined the army when he reached adulthood and was stationed in Germany during the early 1970s. During his time overseas, he was convicted of manslaughter for killing a teenager and served 3 years out of a 4-year prison sentence. In 1979, after moving back to the US, Moust was accused of attempted murder for stabbing a friend while they slept. He was not found guilty, although evidence would later reveal that he had committed the crime. 2 years later, he drowned a young man named Donald Jones in Illinois. He then went to Texas and stabbed another young man, who survived with serious injuries. While in prison for the stabbing, Moust was extradited to Illinois to face a murder charge for Jones's death. He was found unfit to stand trial and spent the next 12 years in mental health facilities and jail. When Moust finally pleaded guilty in 1994, he received credit for time served, significantly reducing the length of his 35-year sentence, which he only served a few more years of before being released in 1999. The prosecutor fought to keep Moust incarcerated, and Moust himself even wrote to the Illinois Department of Corrections telling them that they shouldn't release him. But the warnings fell on deaf ears, and he was turned back out onto the streets. He proved he couldn't control his violent urges in 2001 when he repeatedly hit someone in the back of the head with a metal pipe. The victim survived and declined to press charges. In 2003, the body of a missing teenager named James Ragagni was found encased in cement on Moust's property. The young man had been strangled to death. Moust was charged with the murder of Ragagni and 2 other teens who were found murdered and disposed of in a similar fashion. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 3 life terms, but took his own life in early 2006. Inside his cell, prison employees found a note confessing to 5 murders and apologizing to the victims' families. 4. Malcolm Benson. When Malcolm Benson was convicted of second-degree murder and felony gun charges in 1995, Michigan had a generous disciplinary credit system in place that allowed convicts to significantly reduce lengthy sentences for serious crimes based on good behavior. The state strengthened its sentencing guidelines in 1998, but the new policy apparently wasn't retroactive. Consequently, Benson was released in 2015 after not even serving the minimum of his 20 to 40-year sentence. Just 9 months later, he fatally shot a 59-year-old Army veteran named Stanley Carter at a bus station during a botched robbery. Witnesses told investigators that there was no type of altercation or argument leading up to the shooting, but that Benson approached seemingly out of nowhere and opened fire. He was also accused of assaulting a woman near the crime scene. If the state's current sentencing guidelines had applied to Benson's first murder case, he would have been required to serve at least 22 years of his sentence, and he would have definitely still been in prison when Carter was killed. A judge sentenced him to life for Carter's murder, and this time he won't be getting any breaks. He'll spend the rest of his days behind bars, where he can no longer harm anyone in the free world. 3. Edward ONeal. In 2016, a teenager named Ryan Roberts was found stabbed to death in a wooded area in southeast Houston, Texas. Authorities charged his best friend, 18-year-old Edward ONeal IV, with the young man's murder. ONeal, who had a history of mental health issues and a reputation as a Satan worshiper, was held in the Harris County Jail for 4 years before the judge overseeing the case reduced his bail. He posted bond while the case remained at a standstill due to his mental competency. Just a few months later, ONeal became the prime suspect in the murder of his cousin's ex-boyfriend, 39-year-old Derek Mike, who was shot to death in a parking lot in late 2020. According to records obtained by the Houston Chronicle, ONeal confessed to the crime to his mother, who reportedly told police that she was afraid of what else her son might do. She also claimed that her son became fixated on the devil at an early age and had a history of killing family pets. ONeal maintained his innocence in court regarding Ryan Roberts' murder in 2016. After being charged in connection with the 2020 murder, he allegedly claimed that he killed Derek Mike at his cousin's urging after she found out that the victim had cheated on her. There have been no updates on either case since news sources reported on the additional murder charge in 2020. Records indicate that there are no inmates by the name of Edward ONeal in Harris County or the state prison system, suggesting that perhaps his cases are still delayed due to his mental health. 2. Eric Pearson. In 1985, Eric Pearson broke into a woman's home in Florida and cut her throat. She survived, and he served just 4 years of an 18-year sentence. Pearson committed his first murder at the age of 28 in 1993, when he beat and strangled 17-year-old Christina Whitaker to death in Davie, Florida. He was released from prison in 2020 after serving 27 years of a 40-year sentence. Barely a year later, Pearson found himself at the center of an investigation into a missing 33-year-old single mom named Erica Verdesia. A witness recalled seeing Erica at a sandwich shop with a grimy man matching Pearson's description shortly before her disappearance. Around the same time, the two were seen together during a traffic stop. Pearson initially told police that he and Erica had parted ways at a gas station, but surveillance footage showed the pair stopping at the store before the traffic stop, which proved that he was lying. 3 weeks after Erica went missing, her remains were found in a canal near Pearson's girlfriend's house. The girlfriend told police that Pearson had recently made some disturbing comments while staring at the canal, including that without a body, the police had no case. Erica's mother, Carmen, believes that Pearson received too many second chances as a convicted violent criminal, and that he shouldn't have been free to kill her daughter. She helped push for a new state law that requires convicts to serve 85% of their sentences. In the meantime, Pearson is being held without bond on a first-degree murder charge. 1. Stanley Taran. In June of 1993, Stanley Taran stabbed family friend Jackie Harris to death during an argument at his mother's Webster, Florida home. He was only 15 years old at the time, but he was tried as an adult due to the severity of the crime. As part of a plea deal, he copped to second-degree murder in exchange for a 51-year sentence. He won a resentencing hearing in 2016 under Florida's newly imposed sentencing guidelines, which require courts to reconsider the punishments of prisoners who received de facto life sentences as juveniles. As a result, Taran was released for good behavior in 2018, 22 years into his sentence. Less than 6 months later, he was implicated in the murder of 40-year-old Fanny Hoke, who was shot execution-style in the back of the head and left on the roadside in Sumter County. Detectives told Leesburg Daily Commercial that they received leads indicating that Taran and Hoke were seen leaving Tampa together shortly before her body was found. Cell phone data confirmed that Hoke was within a half-mile of Taran's residence several hours after they were spotted in Tampa, and investigators recovered the alleged murder weapon during a search of Taran's vehicle. Authorities declined to elaborate on a possible motive or the suspected nature of the relationship between Taran and Hoke, but said that they did not believe the victim was with the suspect against her will. And while the case went quiet in the news, prison records show that Taran was sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder and robbery with a deadly weapon in 2022. Thanks for watching. Would you rather live next door to a paroled killer who minds their own business and seems to be on the straight and narrow, or next to a habitual thief with dozens of non-violent convictions under their belt and no apparent desire to turn their life around? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you soon.